Okay.
What's the story here?
A beam engine built by Bolton Watt in 1788. This is a quarter scale. Up until that time, or very early on, put it this way, in 1712, Thomas Newcomen invented the first steam engine to be used ever, but it was just an up and down pumping water, no rotary motion.
No flywheel, yes.
And then about 70 years later, they thought, well, surely we can make it turn a crank, which they did.
Okay, but now there's no crank, there's two planetary gears.
Yeah, that's right. Now, James Watt didn't want to pay the royalties on a crank because somebody had patented a crank, which I find most awkward. I don't know how they could possibly get away with that, because you have a crank
On everything, on a bicycle, on anything, drilling machine, the whole lot.
Yeah.
Everything's got cranks.
So he didn't want to pay the royalties, so he invented this and he called it the sun and planetary gears. It's got a strap the other side to hold them together. Because it runs around like this, the flywheel is actually turning 2 times for every up and down of the crank. This drove a polishing machine. We were talking about the era where everybody had buckles on their shoes or on their belts. And this drove the polishing machine.
The full-size version of this drove a polishing machine
Yeah.
for belt buckles.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Now this is quarter scale, so you can imagine 4 times as high, 4 times as long, and it was a grand total of 16 horsepower. That's about 12 kilowatt. Again, the steam pressure was very low, in fact not much above atmospheric, because the boilers were made out of copper and
Wrought iron and yeah.
lead. So the power really came from the vacuum, because this has got a condenser.
So it's an atmospheric engine, or what is it called?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was the term they used. The vacuum was a high, say 12 pounds per square inch equivalent, instead of 1 or 2 for the engine. The other thing is, I thought when I build a beam engine, it'll have a simple valve gear, but this one is not simple.
Not at all.
This is before the D valve was invented. You can see how that weights open it and the rod closes. Now the bottom one is now closing, and when it gets to the top it's closed and it trips the other one for opening the steam. And again, coming down, pushing that one closed, and the bottom one trips. It's operated by weights opening it, and all this trip mechanism, which is a bit tricky to get adjusted correctly. But it's got like a poppet valve there for the inlet, the exhaust there, and the same down the bottom. Inlet valve, exhaust valve, operated by these rods. So that was quite interesting, because something else you can't do is scale weight. And the weights I found, if I had them the correct size,
It wouldn't work.
they were too light.
Yeah.
So I've actually extended the rod and put in.
Because I mean, there is a very tiny little counterbalance hanging. Oh, it's on a rod down there.
Yeah, this one.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's just for looks.
Yeah, that's
Is that the one actually working?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's to keep these.
Oh, keeping them down. Okay.
Up, because that latch is there, and as I say, it's quite critical to get it exactly right.
It's quite a violent movement. I'm guessing.
Yeah, but that's because I haven't got water in it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Now, the weights should be in the water, but what I've done, I've made a sort of a crude dash pot down the bottom in the water, because the valves, as you say, would open too quickly, and it would be top dead center and start going the other way.
Okay.
Be careful. So the valves need that half a second or so for the crane to get that further over. Quite interesting, actually.
And the design for this, what sort of drawings did you follow?
Oh, now there's a story in itself. The full-size one of this, the original one, is in the Science Museum in London, South Kensington. So it's there, but it's not working. But it's the full-size original engine.
And they moved it there.
They moved it there from Birmingham.
Jeez.
Now, it's a very historical engine, so much so that the Germans came over in 1912 to the museum, took it to bits, made proper drawings, put it back together again, took the drawings back to Munich and built a full-size replica.
Unbelievable.
So I said to the curator of the museum, I want to build a model of this, have you got drawings? He said, well, funny enough, we've got copies of the German drawings, all 72 of them.
What
He
a
said,
score.
unfortunately, I can't give you to them. You can only sell them at £1 a drawing. So it comes to £72. Now, we're talking 30 years ago. So I said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't afford that. So he said, well, maybe Christmas time, you know. So I went back to my dear wife, Pat, told her the story, and she said, go for it. So I phoned the bloke and I said, Christmas has come early now.
And this is 30 years ago, yeah?
Bought them here. Fortunately, only a few words of instructions or description in German, which of course I don't speak German. But there's only some words, like the equivalent was rough. So you know, well, it's rough, it wasn't smoothed over or something. And why did I build it? I wanted to build a big beam engine, because I like beam engines. But then normally the beam up here is cast iron, and you can imagine what the weight of that cast iron beam would be if I made it. So I discovered that the original beam engines were made of wood. Hence, this is a pretty good replica copy of the original, including the joints.
Fantastic. Look at all the strapping, and I'm guessing this is a bit of a counterweight.
Yes. Yeah, the weight is important. This originally was too heavy on this side because it's only got a small rod.
Oh, that's quite a
And it
sizable
Yeah,
piece
so
of metal
it was too
there.
heavy and it would come down quickly and then slow. So this is actually hollowed out, quite a lot of it. You don't see it, but it's hollowed out
Okay,
and filled up.
fantastic.
This is a pump, just to pump water from a well to keep the water in there topped up to keep the condenser cool. There we have it. This is not fake brickwork. I shouldn't tell you.
You should have made miniature bricks. I'm very disappointed in you. But otherwise, a grand job, and I think
Yeah, I enjoyed doing that. It's the first one I completed. Got a governor on the other side, driven by the chain.
you got to be careful because you want to put your fingers anywhere near this. All this
Yeah,
thing wants to do
bite
is
you.
eat you. No, Colin, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one.